Yeah, I mean, you guys bring up a lot of good points. I was going to mention the definition of evangelism, and it certainly has that Christian connotation to it, the spreading of the Christian gospel by public preaching or personal witness. It kind of has a second definition about zealous advocacy of a cause, which I could see that being another use of the term, but mainly the word is it has a religious connotation to it, and obviously we chose the name of this topic to be provocative. I would never describe what we do as evangelism, whether you want to call it on behalf of atheism, secularism, reason, rationality, whatever. I would never describe it as evangelism. But clearly, there's been this effort by a lot of theists and Christians to describe atheists who are outspoken as evangelizing because like you guys have mentioned, they have this concept that atheism is a religion or that it's a religious belief, and they really want to, put us in that box because that way they feel like they can attack us, which I find to be quite ironic because in that sense they're kind of admitting that religion is a bad thing, or and they'll say that we have to have faith in order to be an atheist, which again, so again they're kind of portraying faith as not a positive thing. Um, so I would never describe, uh, you know, advocating for reason or secularism as being evangelism. Now, certainly what we do is we definitely do advocate for a cause. And I wouldn't call it atheism, of course, because there's no tenets, there's no beliefs, there's nothing to advocate for. It's just lacking a belief in God. But it's kind of how do you get there? How do you get to that point of not believing in gods? And so we kind of advocate for logical thinking and for there's really no other way to go about it than to address the claims of religions. So, like Dater was saying earlier about how people evangelizing, they kind of go out and they broach the subject and they are out on street corners, kind of confronting people, or they're out there being very outspoken. Whereas, as far as us as atheists, like we're really left to respond to claims of religious people because the word atheist really shouldn't exist. It only exists because there's so many people that do believe in gods. So we are really just responding to claims made by religions and theists, and it shouldn't just be about attacking religion or religious claims, though. It's also about advancing logical thinking and reason, and also explaining the evidence, that supports a lack of belief in God. So in that aspect, we definitely do those things for sure. And as far as secularity goes, that's not something that's confined to atheists. Certainly, theists can also advocate for secularism. There's plenty of Christians and theists that go out there and they understand that there should be a separation between the government and religion, and that the two shouldn't really be mixed. So that's not exclusive to atheists either. And so as far as the way that I approach it, my MO is I don't really broach the topic unless somebody else is putting out their religious opinion or claims in public. So I don't ever just randomly go up to people. I don't go out on street corners. I don't start talking about religion or atheism unless somebody else has brought up the subject first. And then I can address the claims that they're making and refute them or explain to them why their claims are incorrect or inconsistent. And so that's the way that I approach it. I certainly wouldn't begrudge any other atheist, whatever methodology they would want to use to approach it. I tend to, definitely, I think that we shouldn't be personally insulting people. We should, keep it civil and try to actually educate people, because the goal is to actually help people understand and make their own decision about, does a God exist or not, or does this make sense or not? Whereas religious people, they try to actually convince you to convert to their ideology. Whereas as far as atheism, there is no ideology to convert to. We're just trying to provide information so that people can think about this in their own mind and then come to their own conclusions. And if they still come to the conclusion that a God exists or whatever, that's their own that's their own way of going about it. And personally, as far as I'm concerned, deism is an acceptable position. It's when you start making claims that are unsubstantiated or that you don't have evidence for that I have an issue. So as long as people are doing that, I'm going to continue to address it. Absolutely. And if I could, just give a personal anecdote, I was a Christian until just a few years ago. And, I always accepted evolution. I fully accepted science and all that kind of stuff. I just never really took the time to actually try to reconcile my beliefs in Christianity with what I knew to be true. They were kind of like separate compartments. And I consider myself obviously somebody who's a rational person, who's a critical thinker, and yet I just never bothered to try to put the two together. So it can be kind of frustrating sometimes, even dealing with moderate religious people, because somebody like myself, I still was kind of doing this thing where I was separating science from religion and not trying to put them together. And that kind of underscores the need for this, atheist evangelism, if you will, because I can definitely point to the fact that having a lot of discussions online with people, with atheists, with people that were science minded and things like that, definitely led to my eventual atheism. I was definitely trying to advocate for my belief in Christianity and always having these conversations on various forums online and things of that nature. And obviously I'm sitting there defending myself, but eventually the things that people were telling me were coming through and they were going to the back of my mind. And it got to the point where I was just like, yeah, you know what, these people are right. I just believing in this stuff just doesn't make sense anymore. And it was kind of a gradual process, but that kind of, again, that really is just demonstrates the need for kind of what we do. We kind of approach it that way. And like I said, you have to kind of approach it that way and understand that people are, they're looking to be, you don't want to confront them. Basically, you don't want to insult them. You don't want to be too aggressive with them, because if you really want them to be convinced that what they believe in is wrong, you have to approach it that way, because just yelling at them or anything like that, it isn't really going to be that effective generally. And it's really odd, because like GE was mentioning about Megan Fox, she has this idea about science that oh well, this is real science and this isn't. So people accept science, but then they make special exceptions for certain things just because they are incompatible with their faith. So they just choose to decide like, oh, that's not real. And also she was going through the museum and she kind of was making this disclaimer like, oh well, they're not stating this is what we currently believe or this is what we think happened. They're stating it like a fact. Okay, well, typically religious people don't come up to you and say like, well, this is what we happen to believe. Like, no, they state it like, oh, this is what actually happened. So and there's no need for such disclaimers, really. I mean, it's like you don't have to say before every statement, oh, this is to the best of our current knowledge. I mean, that should be obvious, really.